You know, there is a very interesting phenomena going on today, and I'd like to talk about it first. There's a whole new movement in philosophy called philosophical counseling. One of the most interesting thinkers in this field is a woman by the name of Shmona Schuster. I probably mispronounced the name. S-C-H-U. No. She practices philosophical counseling as an alternative to psychotherapy. And what's most interesting is that when clients come to her, and she has an office in Israel, and she works out of Israel, she finds that before she can do any work, she must first critique, challenge the very language they use. She challenges the language her clients use to rid it, to purge it, of psychological and psychotherapeutic language. Because, as she's found, if these ideas go unexamined, it distorts the entire interview and it sets up goals implicit in psychotherapy and therefore makes philosophical counseling and its goals difficult to reach. So what does she think? She says that what she must do is critique psychotherapy and psychotherapeutic language, especially psychoanalysis, from her clients. I think that was really wonderful, very fine insight. I would go further. I would say that we cannot get into classic philosophy until we could critique Aristotle. Nearly all philosophy, and after this talk, if you would just do one thing, you'll see exactly the truth of this. Go into any book in philosophy, introduction to philosophy, history of philosophy, and look up the thinkers that we are going to talk about this evening, and you will find that all the things that are said about these thinkers come out of Aristotle. Why is that significant? Because, to jump ahead, later, when we have the actual fragments of these thinkers, we'll compare what the fragments say against what Aristotle says they say, and we'll give them a grade. The difficulty with the thinkers we're going to be dealing with today is that there is no extant, and there is no literature in existence from the classic age that contains any direct quotes from these thinkers. They're all in secondary sources, and a good part is drawn from Aristotle. Now, there are other thinkers who contributed to what these thinkers thought, but they are not included in the textbooks. And therefore, since this is a class really an introduction of philosophy as a wisdom tradition, I would prefer talking about these thinkers from contemporary thinkers or people who lived after them, but who could reflect back on their work so we can get a fresh and different view of these early thinkers. Because the thesis I'm going to present is, there was no beginning in philosophy. It blossomed full, brilliantly. It had no evolution. You see, if you read Aristotle, everything he wrote about the people that preceded him, all the preceding thinkers, he sees as merely thinkers who were simply his predecessors leading up to what he himself thought. And therefore he sees himself as king of the hill. We're going to challenge that when we get into the kinds of writings where we have direct quotes from the authors, but we won't be able to do that this evening because the primary material that we have on these thinkers comes from Aristotle and later thinkers. What did we say about that? We said that history books just stay with Aristotle said about him, thinking that Aristotle was a good guide for the understanding of his contemporaries and those that came before him. We're going to show that's not the case. And we'll do that in succeeding talks. So, what are we going to talk about this evening? The dawn of philosophy coming from three primary thinkers. Here they are, Thales, Anaximander, Anaximenes. They're the thinkers we're going to deal with. Now, notice how we're going to approach it. Everybody knows how Aristotle sees these people, and I can just go over it, and then I'm going to put aside what Aristotle says about these thinkers, and then go to people who existed at the time or came after him and reflected upon their thought, and you'll see the difference between the two. Now, Thales was said, according to Aristotle, to have said that the basic element in all existence is water, and that's the primary element. And that's how Thales saw the whole universe and everything about it. The first principle and basic nature of all things is water, says Aristotle, claiming to represent Thales. And the earth rests upon water, and all things are full of gods. And the magnetic stone has soul because it sets the iron in motion. These are the four basic quotes. That's all that exists from Aristotle's view of Thales. That's the whole thing. Now we're going to use other thinkers. And when we do so, I think you're going to find something different. So let's take a look at what other contemporaries and people who came after Thales said he thought, rather than stay with those four statements of Aristotle. Now, in order to play the game, let me jump ahead and tell you get a quick view of what we're going to say about philosophy so it's much easier to see. Primarily, there is an ultimate. Then there's mind, or what is intelligible. And then that intelligibility is in soul. And this is the basic pyramidical structure of all classic philosophy. This is sometimes called the good, or the one in Plato, and other thinkers, by the way. The one. This is called the intelligible, sometimes called mind, and soul you already know. Now, what's interesting about this is that philosophers have to not only account for the existence of these things, but to talk about how it's possible to proceed upward through these to successively reach what's intelligible, or mind, and the ultimate, by the use of mind alone, by use of reason, by use of reason plus contemplation. This is the model. This is philosophy. It's true for all Neoplatonic thought. It's true for all the thinkers. Now let's take a look at Thales. This is what other thinkers thought Thales said. The first thing you see is that God is the same as mind. Right? God is the same as mind. But mind in the universe. So therefore, Thales saw, now this is from Atticus, Atticus, A-C-T-I-U-S. He said Thales had this view, that God is the same as mind in the universe. That is to say, the vast universe taken in its totality, there is plenty of evidence of mindfulness throughout the entire universe.